The Bell, the Book, and the Spellbinder by Brad Strickland, Chapter 4. The rest of the weekend passed quietly. The next week began with warm, sunny skies, and the people of Dustin Heights began to think that spring had arrived at last. But the balmy weather did not improve Johnny's spirits. He and Sarah had played a few rounds of flies and grounders with Fergie on Saturday. Fergie wasn't his usual cheerful self, but glum and gruff. He had left their game early, and they hadn't seen him again. Then the weekend was over, and school was back in session, and Johnny got busy studying for a big Latin test. But he didn't stop thinking about his friend, and he and Sarah talked the matter over. On Wednesday, after they left school, Sarah suggested that they head over to Hagstrom College, where both Professor Childermass and Sarah's dad taught. She thought they might be able to find something about Mr. Jarman Thanatos at the college library. As the dependent of a faculty member, she had a library card, and the college library staff seemed to know her well. She and Johnny went through the card catalog without finding any books about Mr. Thanatos. Then, Sarah had a great idea. The Dustin Heights newspaper, the Gazette, dated all the way back to before the Civil War, and the college library had shelves of huge, oversized volumes of the bound newspaper. Fortunately, the Dustin Heights Historical Society had created a set of indexes for the newspapers, and Sarah suggested that she and Johnny tackle these. They had to go down into the basement. It was creepy there, with long pine tables, scuffed and scarred by generations of students, tall gloomy shelves and scattered light bulbs in white metal shades, throwing little yellow islands of illumination. The Gazette indexes alone filled most of one shelf, and they hauled a batch of these over to one of the tables, beginning with the index for 1884. They looked for the name Thanatos in each one, and they also checked for the name Childermass, although the professor's father had been on the faculty of Princeton University. For a long time they had no luck at all. Finally, Sarah grunted in satisfaction and said, "Here's something, Dixon. It says the 1886 papers have 3 stories about someone named Thanatos, May 10, October 27, and November 14. Let's get them." The old newspapers were bound in crinkly maroon covers, held together by silvery rivets. Their spines bore a library call number and the months and year of the newspapers each oversized book contained. 2 heavy volumes covered 1886, and Johnny pulled both out, releasing a cloud of dust that smelled old and dry and stale. He sniffed and carried the heavy volumes over to the table, where he plumped them down under a light. Sarah opened the first one. The newspapers inside were fragile, brown, and brittle with age, and she had to turn each page carefully to keep it from flaking away. The Gazette had been published on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays in 1886, and most of the issues had 8 pages. These were densely packed with type, and there were no photos or drawings at all, just column after column of old newsprint, with the stories separated by thick black lines. They found the issue for May 10 that the index had listed, and skimmed through all the columns. The story was a small one on page 4. Its headline read, "Mystery in Ellisboro." Johnny read through the article. It said that an 11-year-old boy named Tommy McCorkle, the shy and bookish son of a wealthy banker in the town of Ellisboro, Vermont, had disappeared on Monday, May 3rd. The town constables had searched everywhere for the boy, and they had questioned one J. Thanatos, who lived in an old house on the edge of town. Someone thought that he had seen Mr. Thanatos talking to Tommy on the afternoon of the 3rd, but Mr. Thanatos had proved that he was elsewhere at the time. "This doesn't tell us much," Johnny complained. "We don't even know if it's the same person." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Come on, Dixon, how many J. Thanatoses can there be? It's not a name like John Smith, you know." Okay, said Johnny. "What's the next story?" The next one was from October 27. Its headline read, "Mystery of Missing Boy Deepens." Johnny frowned. A frightened boy had told an Ellisboro constable that he had seen the face of his friend, Tommy McCorkle, looking out of the second-floor window of Jarman Thanatos' house. When officials investigated, they found the place completely locked up and apparently deserted. After getting a warrant, the constables broke into the old house and searched it thoroughly, but they could find no trace of the missing boy or of the mysterious Mr. Thanatos. "Okay," grunted Johnny. "I have to admit this is the right guy. Next." The next article was the last one, and it was the most puzzling of all. It was on the front page of the November 14 issue, under the headline, "Search for Missing Tommy McCorkle Yields Mysterious Orphan." The article was a long one, was a long one. Johnny read it, and then he took a deep breath. "What's it say?" demanded Sarah, reaching to tug the bound volume around. "Don't bother," said Johnny. "I'll tell you. The police started looking for Mr. Thanatos, but they couldn't find any trace of him, and then they got a letter from the Hannah Duston orphanage right here in town." "I never heard of an orphanage before, or I never heard of an orphanage here," objected Sarah. Johnny shrugged impatiently. "It's probably not here anymore. I mean, this was about 70 years ago. Anyhow, the director of the orphanage read in the paper about the search for Tommy McCorkle and about Mr. Thanatos. And when a strange kid showed up on the doorstep of the place, she seemed to think it might be the McCorkle boy. So she telegraphed the Ellisboro police. And Banker McCorkle and Constable Paget rode down on the train. But they were disappointed because the kid wasn't Tommy at all. He was the same age as Tommy, but he said he was Adam Nemo, the nephew of Jarman Thanatos. And the funny thing was that the letter came the next day from a bank in Dustin Heights. It said Jarman Thanatos had opened a substantial savings account for his nephew, and that the boy was not to be adopted out. When he turned 18, he was to get all the money in the account. Meanwhile, a check went to the orphanage to pay for his room and board until he could claim the money. But the strangest thing was that when he did turn 18, his birthday happened to be October 31st, Adam Nemo had to change his name before he could claim the money." "Change his name to what?" asked Sarah. Johnny stared at her. "To Jarman Thanatos," he said in a whisper. Sarah shivered. "That's weird," she said. They read through more indexes, but they could find no further mention of any Jarman Thanatos. Sarah checked for stories about the Hannah Duston orphanage, though she found a very odd one from the 1890s. They looked it up. And she found a very odd one from the 1890s. They looked it up. It was the story of how the Hannah Duston orphanage had burned to the ground on the night of October 31st, 1893. No lives were lost, but the whole structure went up in flames, and all the records that had been stored in the basement were completely burned. Sarah counted under her breath. 86, 87, 88. "What are you doing?" asked Johnny. She shook her head and continued counting until she reached 93. Then she stared at Johnny. "Adam Nemo would have had his 18th birthday on October 31st, 1893, she said. And then if he wanted to inherit his money, he became Jarman Thanatos." The name hung in the air between them. Johnny had an attack of goose pimples. He felt as if he were suffocating down there in the dark, stuffy basement. He and Sarah hurried upstairs and out into the warm afternoon sunlight. "What do we do now?" asked Sarah. Johnny shook his head. "I don't know, but I think we'd better tell the professor. This is all getting too mysterious, if you ask me." "I think you're right," agreed Sarah. They hurried away. Neither of them noticed that someone watched them go. It was a short, thin, elderly man with long white hair spreading over his shoulders. He smiled grimly to himself and then went into the library. He stayed for only a few minutes before coming out again. This time, when he walked, something rustled in his coat pockets. The sound was whispery and soft, like crumpled sheets of old newspaper. That night, Fergie had a hard time getting to sleep. He tossed and turned for a long time. He tried counting sheep, but that didn't work. He had an old beat-up Motorola radio beside his bed, and he turned it on with the sound very low. He twiddled the dial until he found a station playing some boring music, and he lay and listened to that for a while. None of it seemed to help. He wanted to get out of bed, climb up in the chair, and pull the Book of True Wishes from its hiding place. But with another part of his mind, a stubborn one, he refused to do it. He would wait and see. If his dad came back home on Friday and nothing unusual had happened, then he would toss the book away. And if the crazy things the book said turned out to be true, well, he would think about that later. It was past midnight when Fergie finally dozed off. Soon he was sleeping deeply, and then he started to have a strange dream. It was the kind of dream he had experienced only a couple of times before, one in which he knew he was dreaming, yet at the same time everything seemed so real. Fergie was walking along a sidewalk in a little town somewhere. The street he was on was full of small white cottages, each with a neat green front yard and a white picket fence. The sidewalk was made of wood, not cement, and the street was unpaved. For some reason, things that were a few feet away from Fergie looked blurred and unclear, while objects in the distance were sharp and crisp. He could see humped green mountains far off beyond the vague shapes of buildings. It was silent. No voices called out. No leaves rustled in the wind. All was as still as death. Then from behind him came an odd, raspy, metallic noise. Fergie looked around and blinked. A young kid was running down the street toward him. In front of the boy rolled an iron hoop, the kind that used to go around the huge barrels called hogsheads. The running figure held a short T-shaped stick, and with this he kept the hoop rolling. But the oddest thing was the way the boy was dressed. He was wearing a blue midi blouse, short pants, and black leather shoes, and his hair was long, curling down over his ears. He reminded Fergie of the picture of Buster Brown he had seen in shoe stores. "Hey!" Fergie yelled. The boy paid no attention and rolled his hoop right past. A horse-drawn wagon came clopping along in the other direction. The old gray spotted horse seemed to be doing all the work because the driver slumped in his seat, chin on chest, asleep. "This is a crazy dream," muttered Fergie. Usually his dreams were far more exciting, filled with adventures and chases and pirate fights. He walked alone for a while and found himself in the center of a small town. A green park was before him. On the 4 streets facing the park stood businesses, some with horses tied to hitching posts in front of them. A few people were walking on the wooden sidewalks, all of them dressed in old-fashioned clothing. Fergie spoke to many of them, but none gave the least sign of having heard him. The dream dragged on and on. Fergie began to feel nervous. He was like a ghost in this strange world of living shadows. People couldn't see or hear him, and when he tried to touch them, he couldn't. He was always farther away than he thought, or the person made a sudden movement that just eluded him. Inside a dry goods store, where spools of thread, thimbles, and needles lay on a counter, he tried to pick up something, but everything was impossible to move. It was as if the things had been cemented to the counter. But then a woman in an old-fashioned dress came over and picked up a packet of needles that Fergie had been unable to budge. He got red in the face and yelled at the woman. She turned away. Obviously, she had not even heard him. Fergie rushed back into the street. He screamed and leaped. He capered and howled. No one paid him the least attention. By that time, Fergie was sweating. This dream had gone on far too long. What if he never woke up? Or what if he were dead? And Catholics were right. This might be purgatory, where he would have to spend thousands of years alone, invisible and outcast. He might never see Johnny or the professor again, or his mother and father. Fergie ran through the streets like a crazy person. He did not watch where he was going, and he did not care. More than he had ever wanted anything in his whole life, he wanted to wake up. He ran until he could hardly lift his feet, until his breath burned in his lungs. Finally fatigued, he slowed. He plodded along, not wanting to halt. He had the creepy feeling that something was stalking him. Some lines from Samuel Taylor Coleridge's spooky poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, ran through his mind. Like one that on a lonesome road does walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. But at last, exhausted, Fergie stumbled to a stop, and then he saw that he had fled right out of the town. He stood on a hill overlooking the village, a little clump of white houses and buildings gleaming in the sun. He was on a dirt road, and as he stared down into the valley, suddenly, from everywhere at once, came the terrible loud pealing of a great bell, so close that it hurt his ears. "I gotta wake up," groaned Fergie. He turned this way and that, looking for any way to escape this deadly dream. Then he saw the house. It was behind a grove of trees, some distance away from the road. He could see the upper stories only, and he could see that attached to the house was a bell tower. Somehow he knew that was where the terrible sound was coming from. He had to stop it. He turned off the road, down a weedy, overgrown driveway. The ground was rutted and treacherous, and round, smooth stones stuck up to trip him. He pushed through brush, and finally came out in front of the old house. The bell tower was on the right, attached to the side of the house, but it had its own door. As Fergie came close, the door slowly opened, as if its hinges were rusty. Another peal of the bell made Fergie's ears ache, but he staggered forward into the yawning black doorway. A stairway ran up the sides of the tower. Fergie began to climb it, grasping the rail, which felt spongy and slimy beneath his hand. When he was halfway up, the bell tolled again, and the whole structure vibrated as if it were about to cave in. Fergie ground his teeth. His eyes were watering. He climbed up, up, up until he stood on the platform with the bell only a yard away. To his despair, he saw that the bell had no rope or clapper, and yet something had produced that horrible sound. "I gotta climb down," Fergie muttered. "It'd kill me if that thing rang with me right beside it." He turned and stood as though frozen. Below him, something was floating up the stairway. It was round and white, and it was a face. The face of a boy about his age or a little younger, but the mouth writhed in agony, and the eyes held a tormented look. The figure came closer, and Fergie could see that it was a ghost. It floated a few feet above the stairway, its feet not even moving. It stretched out its hand toward Fergie in an imploring way. "Set me free," said the apparition. "He locked me in a coffin." Fergie backed away. He stood in an arch in the belfry with the air at his back. "Leave me alone," he shouted. "Don't make the wish," moaned the ghost. "Don't let him trap you." The bell did not move an inch, and yet it tolled, and the sound struck Fergie like a physical blow. He toppled backwards, his hands scrabbling for a hold. Fergie felt himself falling to the ground. 50 feet below, he tumbled through the air, seeing the belfry rush away. Above him, the ground rushed up to meet him. "No!" Trembling, Fergie sat up in bed. He gasped for breath, and he realized that he had awakened from the dream. Just then, an announcer's voice came from the radio. "And now we sign off until 7 a.m. tomorrow. Good night and sleep tight out there in Radio Land." Then Fergie jumped out of bed as if he had been scalded. From the radio came 3 evenly spaced tolls of a great bell. And that is the end of chapter 4.